The Jedi were supposed to be the guardians of peace, yet war followed them wherever they went. They claimed to be the great defenders of the galaxy, yet time and time again, they failed to protect it. They stood on the highest ground, looking down upon the very people they swore to serve, believing their way was the only way. But what if they were wrong? What if the galaxy was never meant to be shaped by their teachings? For centuries, the Jedi believed they were necessary, that without them, chaos would consume everything. But the truth is far more complicated. The galaxy did not stop turning when the Jedi fell. The stars did not flicker out. Life went on, and in many ways it thrived in ways the Jedi never could have imagined. They held themselves up as the light, but they never realized that light can blind just as much as darkness. There was never a time when the Jedi ruled the galaxy. They were always a faction, a belief system, a movement that rose and fell like so many others. The republic they fought for was flawed. The battles they waged were not always just, and the wisdom they preached was often drowned out by their own hypocrisy. The Jedi were not the answer to the galaxy's problems. They were part of the problem. Yet, even now, people speak of them as if they were something greater, as if they were the heart of the galaxy itself. But a heart does not stop beating when one part of it is removed. The galaxy endured, it adapted, it learned to exist without the Jedi, proving once and for all that they were never essential. They were only ever a passing force, a moment in time. Nothing more. In this video, we are going to break down exactly why the galaxy never needed the Jedi. We will examine their failures, their flaws, and the illusions they built around themselves. We will look at the wars they fought, the people they abandoned, and the cycle they could never escape. And by the end, one truth will be undeniable. The Jedi were never as important as they believed themselves to be, and the galaxy, it was always meant to move beyond them. The Jedi spoke of balance, but they never really understood it. They clung to an idea that the Force should be controlled, shaped, and wielded like a tool, but that was never its purpose. The galaxy was not meant to be held together by a single order of monks, who saw themselves as the only ones fit to dictate right from wrong. The moment the Jedi declared themselves the keepers of peace, they ensured that peace would never come. Balance does not mean dominance of the light side or suppression of the dark. True balance means the freedom to choose, to let the galaxy move as it was meant to, not as a council of robed elders deemed appropriate. The Jedi were terrified of darkness, but darkness was always going to exist. It was a part of the natural order, and trying to erase it only created stronger resistance. By eliminating their own connection to emotions, the Jedi cut themselves off from understanding those they swore to protect. They stood above the people of the galaxy, claiming wisdom, yet they failed to see the suffering right in front of them. Their belief in known attachment made them cold, their rejection of love made them weak, and their refusal to adapt ensured their own downfall. They never truly served the galaxy. They served an outdated philosophy, and when that philosophy collapsed, so did they. They faded, not because the Sith were stronger, but because the galaxy had outgrown them. A rigid system built on fear cannot last. And despite all their efforts, the Jedi proved they were never meant to be the foundation of balance. If the Jedi were truly guardians of peace, why did their presence always seem to invite war? The Clone Wars were the greatest example of their failure, not as warriors, but as an institution. They did not see the trap set before them, because they were blinded by their own arrogance. They thought their ideals made them immune to corruption, yet they were the first to fall into it. The Jedi swore never to be soldiers, yet they commanded armies. They spoke of justice, yet they fought a war that was never theirs to begin with. The Republic's corruption had been festering for years, yet the Jedi fought for it as if it were worth saving. They did not fight for peace. They fought because they had no other choice. They could have left. They could have abandoned their positions and sought out a new way. But they were too proud, too committed to a broken system to see that they were being used. And in the end, they became what they swore to oppose. Generals instead of protectors. Enforcers instead of peacekeepers. And when the war was over, when the Republic turned to Empire, the galaxy did not rise up to save the Jedi. Because by then, the Jedi had already lost the people's trust. They had fought for a cause that was never meant to last. And the people of the galaxy moved on without them. The Jedi may have believed they were necessary, but history proved otherwise. Even after their fall, the galaxy continued. People adapted, governments changed. Entire civilizations carried on without their so-called guidance. The Jedi were a legend, a memory, but they were never the foundation of the galaxy's survival. Smugglers and traders built new economies. Warlords claimed power. Resistance movements rose up. These people did not need the Jedi. They built their own futures, made their own choices, lived by their own rules. The Jedi would have seen them as chaotic, uncontrolled, but in truth, they were simply free. Free from the limitations of an ancient order that never truly understood them. For centuries, The Jedi claimed to serve the people, yet when they were gone, those same people learned to stand on their own. They formed alliances, they fought for their own causes. They became more than just pawns in a war between light and dark. The galaxy was vast, full of life beyond the reach of the Jedi's teachings, and that life thrived without them. In the end, the Jedi were not the reason the galaxy endured. They were only ever a small part of its history. And when they were no longer there to enforce their version of peace, the galaxy did not crumble. It adapted, as it always had. The Jedi claimed to seek knowledge, yet they hid from it whenever it challenged their beliefs. They locked away ancient texts, refused to study the Sith, and silenced those who asked too many questions. They feared the unknown, even as they claimed to embrace the Force. They were not wise, they were afraid. They told themselves that emotions led to the dark side, yet they could not see that it was their own suppression of emotion that created the very darkness they feared. By rejecting attachment, they created loneliness. By denying anger, they allowed injustice. By avoiding fear, they ignored the warnings of their own downfall. The Jedi thought they had found enlightenment, but they had only blinded themselves. They believed the Force had chosen them to bring peace, but the Force does not choose. It flows through all things, unconcerned with the ambitions of a single order. The Jedi were not special. They were not chosen. They were simply another group of beings trying to force their beliefs onto a galaxy that never needed them. And when the Force moved beyond them, when it found new voices to carry its will, the Jedi could not accept it. They faded into legend, refusing to admit that their time had passed. But the truth remained. The Jedi were never as important as they believed themselves to be. For every Jedi who swore to uphold peace, another fell to war. For every master who claimed wisdom, a student questioned it. The Jedi Order did not fall once. It fell again and again, throughout history, never learning from its own mistakes, always clinging to the same broken cycle, always repeating the same failures. The Sith rose and fell, and the Jedi followed. The Republic collapsed, and the Jedi disappeared. Over and over, history repeated itself, yet the Jedi refused to change. They believed the light side was the only way. But light without balance is just another form of blindness. And blindness leads to destruction. They could have broken the cycle. They could have adapted, could have evolved beyond the rigid beliefs that doomed them. But they did not. They held on to the past, believing tradition was more important than survival. And in the end they ensured their own extinction. If the Jedi had truly understood the Force, they would have known that it does not need them. It never did. It moves with or without them. And the galaxy? It does not wait for those who refuse to change. The Jedi believed they were the heart of the galaxy, but they were only ever a passing moment. They saw themselves as its protectors, yet the galaxy was never theirs to protect. They thought they were necessary, yet time proved otherwise. The people of the galaxy did not need them to survive. The Force did not need them to exist, and the future, it moved on without them. The Jedi were not the beginning or the end. They were only a chapter, and even without them, the story continued. The Force will always flow. Civilizations will always rise and fall, and balance. True balance. It will always exist beyond the reach of a single order. The Jedi were never the only path. They were only one of many. And in the end, the galaxy did not need them. It never did. And it never will.